Hello. So we're back. I finally got around to making this looper video. As you can see, new camera. Hopefully, much better resolution. Hopefully, slightly better audio. Got a better microphone setup this time. So this video is going to be showing the looper running what is now the first firmware update that was launched since the original launch of the looper. All the info for what the newest version and support is going to be on the website. There's a downloadable guide as well as the firmware for how to install it and get your looper updated and running. So there are a few additions, a few improvements, and tweaks since the launch version. So there's a new method of windowing which is now applied to the loop points. So it's helped clear out a lot of audible artifacts that were prominent before. So if you were dynamically moving the start position or the length, depending on where the playhead was, you could be pushing it and you could get more audible clicks. Whereas now there's a lot more smoothness to the audio playback control. In addition, we've got the record time up to 9 minutes per deck. So yeah, this is going to be a long video, I think. So hopefully I cover a good range of examples and give you some ideas for how to use this module. So please enjoy. Cheers. Okay, let's dive into the looper's controls and looping capabilities. I've got it set up effectively in the factory default setting. No configurations defined or anything, and both decks are completely blank. So we can tell that they're both empty decks by the 3-point pulsing animation, which shows that it's waiting to record its initial loop. So I've manually set all the controls to like a sort of normal. Both speeds are set to the original playback speed. Length is all the way up. Start point is at the origin. For a direct sound, I have a little enveloped VCA triangle wave from the CSL here. Can actually control a perfect fifth up with this voltage offset. So we're seeing the raw signal in green here, and the yellow is the output of the looper, which is what we're monitoring. So you can see and hear that as I drive it into the input, we're getting that softening, we're getting that analog limiting, the wave shaping that is for any signal. It's always going to limit the point long before the codec we get a chance to digitally clip. So it's always going to be analog saturation if a hot signal is driven in. I'll keep it driven a little bit just so the peaks are softened slightly of the triangle wave. Okay, to record into the looper, the initial recording, I simply just hit the record button. You'll see it will start to spin. As soon as I hit record button again, it's going to start looping and showing me the location in the playback buffer, which I can then change the length, change the start position, change the playback speed. To erase, just hit the erase button and it does a wipe and you're back to starting from scratch. So this time, let me capture some audio. There we go. So I'm going to use a few tricks as I start to build things up and start capturing more. So you can see every time it loops back at the original position, that's the start position of the loop. And because I've got the length all the way up full, it shouldn't actually matter where I have that start position. It's always going to play the entire content. but it's actually the defining factor for the clock output in this instance. So by default, the time control, the time pot, that will determine a set number of divisions. So you can think of it like a clock divider, but it's more a case of the playback duration of the loop gets equally divided, and then every one of those divisions, it sends out a trigger. So you can go from just one trigger to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think it jumps to 12, 24, 36. I think it goes up to maybe 64. So after 10, it then sort of jumps up in more useful division increments. And you can see it's displaying on the clock output. So this timing is, let's see, I set it to, if I reduce the duration, I've now got this repeating playback audio pattern, and I'm getting eight pulses during that sequence. So hear that, I could take that clock out, and I could then use that to clock my envelope. So it's a way of using the existing looping material to generate sort of rhythmic content that could even then be resampled in. So here's us back to our original. We're hearing that like double click on the start point. It's because it's on that first reset point. It's clocking the envelope. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to move it around and change it so that it's going to fire just after the third recorded pulse. There we go. At the moment, anything that's patched into the input, we're going to be hearing. There's actually a few configurations that you can define to the input setting. So to affect the left deck, in this case, I'm going to hold both retrigs and press record. So you can see it changed it from being steady lit to pulsing white, and we no longer hear that fourth hit when it triggers. It's just silence. So this has muted the audio content at the input. So you no longer hear that passing through to the output until I hit the record button once, and that's now pulsing yellow. So this is input monitoring mode, where you've got the option of muting or monitoring incoming signals, and it won't record until I press record again, and it goes steady yellow, like that. And as soon as I hit record again, it's gone back to pulsing white, which means it's muted the input again. So this is a really useful mode in many contexts where you might be continually monitoring playback and building up layers of a loop, but you might want to only hear your raw signal just before you're about to record, or for specific monitoring situations. A third option here, if I press it once more, it's now gone off entirely. So as soon as I hit it, it's going to start recording, and we're still not going to hear the input. We'll only ever hear what is played back at the output. So what I'm going to change the input amplitude. I'm going to have to do a guesswork here. Extend the release, and I'm going to hold this button to make it play up the octave. So as soon as I hit record, it's going to... We still didn't hear anything. It's still muted. now we're hearing the playback after it's done that cycle of the loop. Okay, I'll take that clock out and I'll go back to our default. So anything that I play in, I'm going to hear any input signal. So let's play about with the actual playback parameters. You can see I can speed up. I can shorten the playback length. And then I can adjust the speed. And that will go all the way through 0 into reverse direction. So you can see these LED indicators are extremely useful when you're dialing in precision playback positions. So if I center it, that's it stalled. So we've got 0 speed playback. Bring it up. The first light is half speed, so we've got essentially 1 octave down. Next one is original playback speed. There we go. That's 1 octave up, so that's twice speed, and then all the way up to the very end is 4 times speed. A little feature that's quite helpful is if you hold the retrig button, I can actually adjust the playback speed, but it's muted the actual application of that speed until a release. There's a way that you can, if you want to like keep things tonal, you might want to jump to precise. Jump to precise playback speeds. It's a way that you can do that without having it track dynamically. Okay, I'll extend this loop. Shorten it down here. So the retrig button, by default, just a quick tap will reset it back to the start position. Again, if you like press and hold, it doesn't reset, and you can use it for sort of hiding the application of the speed until you release it. So I could actually self-patch this and get some interesting results where I set this to being 2, set it to full loop length, and then I can send the clock to self-reset at that point. So this is a way that I can lock it to equal division playback of the original capture without changing the fundamental loop length. I can modulate the start position to choose exactly where it's locked to. Okay, so let's dub a bit more in, because I've got these 4 hits now, so it's landing on that perfect 5th interval. Let's take our clock output back in, go up the octave. Let's make this shorter and more percussive. Reduce the input level a bit. If I was in the record monitoring mode, I wouldn't have had to pull the input jack there. So that's an instance where that could have been useful. Before I move on, I'll quickly talk through the looper's load and save capabilities, just because I'm going to be using this loop to process further and redub, record between decks. So this way I've got something I can return to if I need. So in the background, the looper does sort of actively move memory from RAM to ROM. So if there's something playing or if you've dubbed something else in, it will automatically store what's in the current buffer. So if you power it off, power it back on, it will pick back up where it left off after it loads. If you want a bit more active control, you can do an active memory save, so that will you can recall from that memory location. This is independent of the auto saving. So the auto saving will just sort of pick up where it left off if power's cut during a loop, but that is a separate memory location it will then start back up from, compared to the active memory save location. So to save, I hold retrig, hold erase, press record, and it did that short animation there to show that it's now saved it to a recallable memory. I could erase that. I could even capture something else in, completely new content. I can then hold retrig and press erase, or tap erase, and it's now reloaded that piece of audio. So a useful way to utilize this save and load is to treat it as a way of undoing a recording. So if I create a new tone, so say this is a constant tone here. So I've just added in some steady tones over that original recording. If I didn't like it, I could then just quickly reload, and it's pulled that reference saved version. Punch record is a useful technique for destructively replacing any segments or audio in a current buffer. So to do that, you hold erase like a shift button, and any time record is pressed during erase, while it's held like a gate, it will be destructively replacing that segment of audio in the buffer. So if I patch this up so that I've got a constant tone, I can hold that in and then do the punch record command to dub in replaced chunks of that new tone. So this is a really quick, sharp way of destructively cutting in segments of audio. It can also be used for inserting gaps. So it can be used quite creatively for creating stops within the current playing back loop. Okay, so I'd like to dive into a bit of the mechanics of how the looper actually records. So anytime that I've been demonstrating recording and overdubbing so far, I've kept the playback speed at the position for original playback speed in forward direction. So anytime that I press record and it's overdubbing more material, we see the record button turns yellow, and the moving point around the display is now pulsing to indicate that that's depicting the record head. So it looks seamless in this instance, but what's actually going on is whenever audio is recording into the looper, it will always record in forward direction at the original speed, at real-time speed, which is based on the fundamental sample rate of the recording engine. So to demonstrate this, if I change the playback speed to being original speed but in reverse, as soon as I hit record, audio is going to start being captured from the position of the playhead, but it's going to immediately start recording in the forward direction of the buffer. So as soon as I press, we're still hearing that reverse movement playhead, but it's now hidden. So we're now just seeing the record head location. So whenever it's recording, you're actually seeing a real-time representation of where the record head is and where new audio content is being dubbed into the existing buffer. And you can actually be dynamically speed changing the playhead while there's more recording going on. So it's a bit of a conundrum. So the playhead and the record head are completely independent of one another. So in this case, we're listening to audio playing back in reverse while new content is being overdubbed into the buffer as it goes. So it means that every time the record head and the playhead are crossing over each other. So built into the engine is some automatic ducking, because there's no way to play back without clicks if you're working in this manner, because there's going to be new sample content coming in that is not going to be not always going to be a zero crossing with the existing material. So built in is a little enveloping duct to remove any of those artifacts in practice, so we don't actually hear it in this instance. You may have noticed, as this has just been dubbing silence, I've got the input level muted, so that's effectively not there. As it's been overdubbing, the existing material has just been sort of fading more and more into the background. So what happens is new audio content comes in, is being written or overdubbed into the buffer. The existing content that it's being summed with is actually multiplied by 0.9 in amplitude. This is to stop it from just completely constantly compounding and eventually hitting maximum scale. So there's always going to be some reduction in the previous content as it's overdubbed. Whereas all the input that's writing into the buffer at Unity. So in this instance, if I've got record constantly going, it's kind of akin to the analog equivalent of this, where you've got tape constantly being run through. It's steadily going to wear out. This is maybe a bit more extreme than that, but it can be used to slowly just over time decay out anything captured to the buffer. In this instance, I can always just reload from my save point. So I've undone all that overdubbing effectively. So where techniques differ here with this original direction, original speed, recording only configuration, where it differs from analog tape, for instance. Tape, you can slow down and record new material onto the tape at slower speeds. And then when you return to original speed, that recorded material is then pitched up. So that's not quite achievable in this instance, where I might be recording in reverse at a slower speed, or playing back in reverse at a slower speed, and then dubbing new material in. Do this. Stop recording now. We're hearing it in reverse. We're now hearing, as it's playing in reverse, the new audio I've put in, we're hearing in reverse because it was recorded in the forward direction. So there are the reason the looper has two independent decks is to retain that capability of overdubbing at lower rates and in reverse direction, and then being able to bring back up to original speed while pitching up, pitching down, etc. So to demonstrate, I'll go back to this original example. There we go. I've got that running at half speed, actually half the length of the loop, just so we've got the same sort of time frame. It's a musical enough ostinato. So I'm going to switch over to monitoring. Oops, that's my input signal. Monitoring from the second deck. Bring up my input and output. So I'm now hearing this through through the second deck. If I now patch in new input signal, so now I'm going to bounce this across to the next deck, but I'm going to use a trick to ensure that I'm capturing the exact loop length. I have the time set all the way down to 1 tick, so it's sending out a trigger on each repeat of the loop. I take that clock out, and if I patch that into the record input, that trigger is going to trigger recording, and then when it hits again, it will stop recording. So this means if I time it right, I can start recording one section of this exact loop while playing new material in. So I'll do something like that. Here it goes. I'll mute the playback from the original. Of course, if I had this channel set in input monitoring mode, I could have it so that I'm only monitoring when I want to, and then as soon as the recording stops, it mutes the input signal. Now this is playing back at original speed, but we're hearing the half-speed version of this with original speed dubbing from new audio. Now we're hearing this new content I put in be played up an octave, and we're hearing the original version that I captured from the left loop playing at original speed. So to compare that, I'll bring that down, we'll listen to our original loop, put that up to original speed. So it's a trick of working between the two decks, and with a bit of practice you can get very seamless captures of bouncing between, repitching, redirectioning. It becomes a really dynamic tool for manipulating. So I've just locked that into a shorter reversed loop, dubbed that over, very quickly you can get a lot of interesting layering going on, just playing with very simple audio sources, bouncing them between the two decks. The looper also includes one-shot playback and one-shot recording capabilities. So I'll demonstrate this for the left deck at the moment. If I hold Shift and press the opposite deck's erase, this is it now set into one-shot playback. I can resize, reposition the start point, and every time it retrigs, it's going to always just loop once, regardless of speed and direction. As you can see, it's only when it reaches an outer extreme of the valid loop. So if I play it back slower, slow it down, I can be scrubbing within the valid region until it hits hits the end, and then that's the end of that one-shot playback. So a way that can be useful just with internal routing. I'll put this back into looping. Full loop length. I shall put the opposite deck into one shot. And that's our original playback speed. So I've cut that down to just a small tone. If I use the clock output, I can use that to re-trigger. So much in the same way I was using the re-trig output to trigger an envelope for triggering external audio that can then be captured in. This is using it to self-trigger playback of the opposite deck. I could then dub that over. And I've created a new addition to the loop there. If I undo that, set that back up so I'm re-triggering. If I want to record that, so I've got like a repeating pattern that I want to just add into just the single iteration of the loop. I don't want to record something new in and then as it reaches the background either miss a gap or overdub, the overdub twice. There's a one-shot record mode, or if I hold the retrig shift button and press the opposite deck's record, you can see the shade of the record button changes to just slightly off-white, mid-tone white and yellow. Now, just confirm, mute the input. So this is the original. I bring that in. We're dubbing over that reverse played segment of the right loop. So now, if I hit record, it's going to be overdubbing, and it will automatically stop recording once it hits the loop point. That adds just a little bit extra of control over playback if you're using the looper to just play back pre-existing audio, or for precision timed capturing of external audio. There's a myriad of different combinations between the two that you can have. If at any point you want to, you don't know where you're at and you want to reset to the default configurations, you can hold. At the moment, this is in one-shot playback mode. If I hold this button and then add in the second retrig and then record. So basically the four outer buttons anti-clockwise starting from this one. That resets it to essentially factory default, so where I started at the beginning of this video. It means that there's no record monitoring mode, there's no one-shot mode. Everything's sort of a blank slate for parameters. A feature that got added to the looper somewhat late on during its development was the inclusion of the faceplate's rings. The display rings themselves are actually capacitive touch sensors. So when interacted with, they'll add a little bit of just subtle control and modulation over the playback speed. You can see as I hold on for longer, it's slowly stalling the playback reel. As I release it, it'll pick back up and get back up to speed. We found that to add that sort of little subtle warble, it can sometimes be tricky when playing with the playback speed. It can be achieved by adding little nudges of CV to the speed. So the speed CV is bipolar and sums with the pop position. Sometimes all that's needed is just a little wiggle to the playback speed. What I'll do for an example, I will actually bounce this deck's content over to the other side, so that they're running in parallel. I'll take the clock divisions down to 1. There we go. And now if I mute the input, bring us up to speed. I've got a duplicate of this reel. If I now set the link switch, it's slaved the right reel's playback controls to the left. So now length and speed and start position are controlled from the left deck's controls. So if I go to the aux output, this is not a stereo implementation. Like we're hearing, it's dual mono, and this is a recorded clone of the original. So it's not going to line up perfectly. It's going to drift, and we can actually introduce more phasing and drift by just playing with the capacitive touch pads, and that's just slowly slowing down the left loop compared to the right. Every time I want to resync the playhead locations, I can just hit retrig on the right, and that's going to warp it into the matching up. Retrig will immediately retrig both on when done on the left loop. A useful trick is the ability to define different playback characteristics between the two reels, and then switching between it being linked and unlinked. So here they're both running full length original playback position. As soon as I unlink, the right deck has immediately jumped to reverse. quite an interesting way to, on the fly, change some octave tunings of playback. Okay, so next I want to dive into a bit of depth on the looper's built-in delay features. To start with, I'll just initialize all the controls. So you can see that, again, that is starting in the top right and then pressing the buttons anti-clockwise. You'll see these guys pulse a couple of times. So that's just reinitializing all the sort of configurations and parameter settings of the looper. It's a nice quick way to start from a blank slate. So for sound source, I'm going to stick with the good old enveloped VCA triangle wave source coming from the CSL here. So if I patch this through. So to engage the delay mode, you hold the retrig button as a shift and press record. So you can see that turned on the yellow LED here on the time clock out display. It's pulsing yellow, so this actually indicates it's in the tape decay mode. I'm going to do this action once more. It's now steady yellow, so this is now the delay feature engaged. So what this does, it actually inserts a delay effect just following the input before the signal reaches the loops, the deck's record head. So it's inserting before anything gets recorded. So what I'll do, I'll bring up the time pot a bit and then strike my envelope. So you can hear, we no longer hear the immediate dry direct sound. We're hearing a sort of cluster of taps. So this is a highly curated but very musically implemented delay specific for the looper. The first half of the rotation of the time pot is delay time over a multi-tap, sort of a cluster of delays. So all the way down to its lowest, and you can hear it's almost like early reflections in a physical space. And as I turn this up, it just spreads out these delays a little bit, and there's variable amplitude between the different taps. And you can hear as I'm turning the pot while there's audio played into the delay buffer. You're able to really control and whip that, warble the sound. Now, if I pull the time pot to the 12 o'clock position, you can hear we're actually getting just a single tap now. So when it hits to about that point, it goes from being the multi-tap cluster to being just a single tap delay. And that starts at 500 milliseconds and will go all the way up to, should be 3 seconds. Here we are. You can, even in that extended range, there's a lot of control for whipping and warbling. So what I'll do now, I'll go back to our loop and actually just capture in some of these chirps and bleeps and bloops. And because the delay is actually inserted between the input and the actual record head of the loop, it's recording this entire performance. So it's not just the dry sound being recorded to the deck. It's a nice way to create some chirps and bird sounds. Let me raise that. Let's go back to just the non-recorded audio. So a lot of times in delays, you're going to want some sort of feedback or repeats to get that echo sound. So you know it's all condensed down to just a single time control pot. So there's not a secondary feedback port. But the way to achieve feedback is to physically patch it. So you're actually getting feedback in the analog domain where the output is then going back into the input. But the benefit of which is every single time is compounding that analog channel sort of limiting and wave shaping effect, which has a lot of benefits in this sort of context. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my audio source and instead of going straight in, I'm going to go via the aux input. So I'm using these as two separate inputs to the looper channel. I'll come from the output aux, so this way I can control using this fader. You can see the right deck, I've just got everything muted. It's blank, it's not in use. And now when I bring this fader down, you can hear that before I've even made any adjustments to the input gain, output gain. It's sitting at a level where it's going to start self-oscillating. Pull the feedback down a bit. I'll try setting this to the single tap variant just to give us a nice clear example. That around the center. Reduce the feedback a little bit. There we are, so it's now starting to naturally decay. Now, anytime there's a pulse every 500 milliseconds, it's going to repeat. This is where it gets really interesting with the multi-tap. The multi-tap section really shines when you have a lot of feedback, so that it starts to self-oscillate, where you can really start to play with no input mixing type approach, or even feedback performances, because it does sound. It has a very microphonic feel to it. Especially in the shorter delay times. It will sort of stall itself, and it won't just sit on a steady pitch. It will do what microphones in an acoustic environment will do. Like as you move them, you're picking up different overtones. So playing about with the input level, that's going to affect how aggressively the input signal is driving the analog input preamp. Of course, when you're at a position like this, you can insert additional kicks from external audio, which can sort of dictate the sort of fundamental that the resonant feedback will settle at. And then because this is analog passing through the actual looper, at any point you can then capture just be capturing any performances of these feedback setups live. I'm going to roll down the input and stop the recording. And it's now just directly playing back what I performed in. And of course I can crop that down, I can highlight a section. So what you're hearing there, there's actually a second parallel effect that gets applied via the time control. So on input signals via the delay stage, that is affecting the delay time. On the output of the playhead from the playback of the loop, it actually brings in a parallel effect. It applies reverb to that playback. So if I'll go to that sort of wave scan type sound. You can hear it sounds very dry. So I bring the time pot down. It's just added a bit more space to the... And the important thing to note is this reverb, it's not... it's audible here because it's applied to the output playback, but it doesn't get applied to the input signal. So you're not actually recording the reverb, you're recording the feedback delay, so the resonance generated there. Bring up the input again, that's quite a nice tone. So we're hearing that playback with the reverb on it. As I increase the delay time, it's removing the amount of reverb while simultaneously increasing the delay tap times. You can really play with space in a lot of different ways. So next I want to expand a bit upon this implementation of the delay mode of the looper, but I'm going to utilize both decks, so both sides of the module in this instance. So I don't have the input signal coming from the enveloped triangle wave yet, but I'm going to play about with the internal cross normalization between the two decks. So each input, the normalization pin of the jack actually comes from the opposite deck's output. So we've got this sort of like infinity loop type crossover feedback path that's available. As soon as a signal is patched into the jack, it breaks the normal. So this becomes the input to that point. But with nothing in, it can be used as a an internal feedback path. So very similar to what I had before, where I had the output of the left deck going back into itself. So the feedback was just one single path loop. Now the output of, say we're using the right deck as our primary focus. The output of this is going to this input. The output of that is then going back here, and so on and so on. The difference here is each time it crosses between the two, it's getting like a dual compounding effect of the analog input circuit. So every single time it's sort of like reined in that little bit more. It does have quite a different character in itself, just that subtle difference compared to just feedback on one side alone. And of course, delay is engaged on this side still. So anything that comes in is being delayed by a certain amount before it gets through. Point is starting to get a sort of almost slanted trapezoidal shape. So that's the asymmetrical diode clipping or diode shaping that's applied at the input circuits. And that's the shape that happens when a signal that is a very high amplitude is going to it. So it never fully gets to a point where it digitally saturates. Add in external sound source. Bring this over. Keep the input up on the right. I'll reduce the input on the left so that's controlling our feedback a little bit. Now, so now the difference from before is because we're monitoring directly from this side, we're actually hearing the initial dry signal first. So we hear that dry tap, and then the delay repeats following that. Whereas before, using just a single side for this implementation, we lost that immediate dry sound, which could be achieved any other way. We could have multed the original source and mixed that back in at the end. But in this configuration, we get that already built into the patch. What I'm actually going to do to demonstrate the cross normalization. So that was an idea that came about during development. We didn't really know what the sonic results would be by having the outputs normalized directly to the opposite inputs. If I take delay mode off and bring up the left side input, this is going to be introducing feedback between the two independent decks. Hear how different that is compared to when the delay mode is on, and of course there's no more control over sort of overtones or like settling frequencies. It kind of latches to its own fundamental. The overdrive can get a bit more aggressive as well because there's no delay, so it's a bit more immediate in the feedback. So between each side, there's a cascading amount of latency essentially, because each side, each input's going into an ADC, it's coming out of a DAC. There's a base level latency introduced in all digital modules. So that compounds again, and it doubles up. So that's where you kind of get this sort of more musical resonance, because we're taking advantage of just the base level latency with analog limiting and the analog feedback path. So if I go back to inserting an external signal. So this is the dry sound. As I bring back the feedback amount by bringing up the left input, you can hear how it latches onto that external input and resonates at the fundamental. So if your external audio has a sort of fundamental pitch, the resonance will sort of grab that and sustain that note. Now, just to add a bit more range to the notes, I'm going to add some more pitches and variation to the direct sound. So you can see here I've got a scion which is just slowly taking over. There's no plant involved, so I'm just using white noise from this noise source and sample and hold. So any white noise into the sense input will let the scion just tick over on its own. I'll take the channel 1's clock output and clock the envelope from there. Reduce the rate slightly. And this is set to quantized mode, so if I patch this to the oscillator's volt per octave. Yeah, as I start to introduce the feedback, it adds reverberance to the sound. So that's just sonically it sounds like a crude reverb because we're getting sort of the initial tap delays following the immediate dry signal. And very quickly that can get to a sustaining but let me put the delay back on. It's almost like a creepy music box. It's really nice, especially when you get like just slight subtle movement to the delay time. You get these sort of warbles, and it sort of stalls the repeats as the warbles sort of decay over time, and it's only the consistent repeating frequencies that will sustain a bit more. So as you can hear when I'm interacting with the capacitive touch pad, that is the surround of the speed control. It has some slight subtle modulation effects to the delay time. They're designed to be just a little bit more subtle than adjusting the time pot, because the single time pot has such a wide range of delay time controls. Just adds a little bit of extra, more subtle warble. So here's one more addition to this sort of series of examples showing the delay mode on, I guess, one half of the looper. So we've had using only a single side, where you're creating feedback within one loop signal flow, and in that instance you lose the direct dry signal. but you have a lot of range of control over the feedback amount. And sort of space added due to the delay time. The second example, it was running in through one and crossover feedback between the two. This last one takes advantage of the auxiliary input and output to give the ability to have a full wet-dry mix. So you can hear only the dry signal as well as a very versatile feedback delay on the other. So I've got my delay already set up on the left, so let's patch into the right. So you can hear already, I'm monitoring from the aux output, so with the fader to the right, I'm hearing only this side, which is the dry, unaffected sound source. As I crossfade over, we're hearing a single tap of the audio. I guess you're hearing multiple taps when the time pot is below 12 o'clock position. But it's still just a single iteration of the signal running through that delay. So to create more feedback or more repeats on that side, what we can do is take our input aux, crossfade it all the way to the left so that this input is going directly there. Take our output of the left deck and insert it into the input. This has now created a feedback loop from the output of this deck back to the input. But using the aux, I can now have a degree of control over how much I'm hearing. So output fader all the way right, completely dry. And of course this is CV controllable, so you could be modulating the wet-dry mix. Here's the added benefit to this configuration. If I am completely dry on monitoring, the input feedback is hard left. If I move over the input crossfader, this is adding a degree of the output of the left deck to the original input. Adds a bit more complexity to the feedback configuration. And switching the crossfader positions, we're listening to only the wet output, but that output itself is feeding back in. So we're no longer hearing the immediate dry signal, we're only hearing a sort of second generation delay. Drop the pitch by an octave. changed the waveform from the triangle wave to a sine wave. It's just a lot smoother overall. I guess I'll add one more modification, because this is the feedback path here, and since I pull that, we no longer have cascading feedback, we just have this single delay time caused here. Let's insert something in between. So I'm going to come from use the bandpass filter from this 1047. So we get that brighter echoing. Whereas I'd decrease the cutoff frequency so it's more full bandwidth. Things get a lot muddier. It's high pass filtered. Keeps things a lot more airy. Anytime I could start capturing any audio that I've got it in a position that I like it. I've just set it to link, and I'm just going to capture a sequence of this. I'll stop recording and mute my inputs. Take the delay effect off, and then there's no application of any further delay or reverb. And as you can hear, this side is captured in the dry sound, other than when I move the crossfader over. So there's different content captured in each reel. Holding the capacitive reel on one side, I'm able to knock them out of sync quite drastically. At any point I want to resync them, I can just hit the retrig button of the right deck and it will spin around and match. And of course we're listening to this in just mono crossfade between the two sources. You could always patch this out left, right and have a dual mono effect. By nature, the two reels will drift over time. Like they're not sample locked. Like they very much are by design set up as two independent virtual tape decks, which gives a lot of versatility for this sort of control. I have a disengaged link. I now have completely independent playback of the two reels. That's now in reverse original speed. Take up an octave. And this one's original speed forward. With the CV expander, you can of course add modulation to start point, to the length, even to the time control. So if you do have the delay engaged, you can be modulating that. The next feature I'm going to demonstrate is a mode referred to as tape decay mode. So I've shown the delay mode earlier. I'm going to show the other position where the clock output display is pulsing yellow as opposed to just steady. So that's reached by holding shift or retrig and pressing record to cycle through the three options of no delay mode, tape decay mode, and delay mode. Yeah, it takes a bit of practice getting used to what the different configurations are, but they all stand out in their own way. So to start off, I'm going to put the time pot all the way up, so starting point, and I'm going to capture a loop with the same enveloped triangle wave impulses. Here we've got four impulses playing back original playback speed. What I'm I'm going to do, I'm going to mute my input, so nothing new is being recorded in, at this stage at least. And I'm going to gradually bring down the time pot. So in this mode, the time pot is time in the sense of how old the tape is. So the further down it is, the older the tape is, so the more it's going to decay and degrade. So I'll actually quarter our loop, so we're just listening to one section, so that way I can apply the tape wearing to this segment, and then we can compare it against the others. So to do this, I need to have it continually recording. So it means that every single time it's compounding and it's recording silence to it, but the older material is being aged. So we can hear already it's starting to just soften. The lows are starting to dissipate a little bit more. So there's a lot of things going on here. Like there's a combination of compression and expansion. So when tape ages, the louder sounds, so the higher velocity, like impulse and stuff, like those will retain their quality longer. So it's the quieter sounds that will degrade more readily. So you kind of get this expansion of dynamic range almost. So that's what we've emulated in this mode. So I'll let it run a few more cycles and then stop it, and then move the start position round so we can compare it to the second original recorded hit. I'll now extend it, so now we're hearing. So this one is untouched, this one is degraded. Let's do this a bit further. I'll start recording over both these. So this section is going to degrade even further. This one's going to start to degrade, and I can actually increase the rate of decay by turning the pot anti-clockwise. Till eventually it'll fade out. So with the pot all the way down, it'll mean that any audio that is captured in, it will be overwritten with the next pass of the record head. So to demonstrate that, I'll bring up the input again and record in another impulse. Now we can hear we're only hearing one repeat of the impulse. So the thing to keep in mind as well is what we're seeing now, we're in record mode versus play mode. So set our original speed, even when it's recording and we're seeing that original speed, the playhead and record head are still decoupled. So they will at some point or another go out of phase as they're moving through. So you can see the record head will lag behind slightly. So this means that there's going to be some inconsistency or irregularity with what the spacing is between the record and playhead, which you can take advantage of and get some really interesting results from, especially when we start manipulating the playback speed. I'm going to shorten my tape length. So I've essentially turned the looper into a tape delay module. So here we have a maximum cut of tape. Of course, I've got previous material there. So if I turn the time pot all the way down, let the record head run its course, that's essentially wiped the tape. So now, every single time it passes, it's going to be degrading each time with variable decay rate over the fast aging of the virtual tape. And my delay time is a combination factor between the length of valid tape, as well as the playback speed. You might be able to hear as well. I'll keep more decays going in. There's subtle modulation to the playback pitch, so it's this is emulating flutter and wow, like actual physical effects that come through tape recording. So now things start to get much more interesting when we play about with the fact that we've got decoupled record and playhead. So we're now seeing the playhead going, and this is set to 1 octave up, so double time playback speed. And you can see when I hit record, we end up seeing the record head moving at half the rate. So now, if I play in some notes, we're going to have the record head writing to the buffer while the playhead is moving at twice the rate. So we're going to hear potentially 2 times playback of the audio, like 2 repeats of the new audio that's incoming. So by nature, there is a higher chance of certain artifacts coming into play in this mode because you've got a live running record head and playhead, and their phase is, they're free running essentially. You've got complete control over the playback speed, so they will cross over at certain points. So, like in the other modes, there is automatic ducking where it's going to try and mute the crossover point where there's new samples being written to the buffer while the playhead is trying to play these back. But depending on timing, you can still occasionally get some artifacts that come into play. But there's always going to be ways around it where found that having the playhead at a lower rate when recording in, it frees you up to then ride the playback speed. If I add more repeats in, so if I set this to being original playback speed but in reverse, then we're going to have our record and playhead passing each other twice in each loop. But the resulting delay is very interesting because you have audibly you can hear the original raw impulse, but then the repeats as they occur are the reverse swell of this. So to start moving this into the next stage of weird, let's instead patch our input to our aux in. We'll continue monitoring from the direct output of this deck, and I'm going to use the aux output to patch feedback back into the input. So here we can actually produce an effect that I think it's referred to as a barber tone, where if I start to increase the feedback, so you can hear this constantly ascending pitch as the playback speed is slightly faster than the record. You can take a bit of practice with this mode to get the feedback balances just right. But the results are quite unique. Okay, so this is the time pot all the way anti-clockwise. So the captured content in the buffer is going to eventually work its way out and be overwritten. So the time it takes for this to fully decay is going to be a combinating factor of the pitch shifting. So the ratio between the record speed, original speed, and how fast it's playing back, that's the interval that's going to be repeating. So it's continually transposing the tone up with each cycle, with each pass. You can get these really ethereal, sparkly tones. Of course, barber tones can go in reverse as well. If I take this down, a little bit of feedback. So this is playback at half speed. So we're getting some crunches, some artifacts in here. So a lot of the time it's a case of balancing the loop length, so the active. So we're hearing the initial sound, then an octave below repeat, and then that's actually dropping down an octave. So it's getting very low very quickly. So I'll get it to original playback speed and then detune it down slightly. So here we can hear that cascading, descending transposition. So let's get things a little bit more chaotic, and I'm going to patch in through the left deck, monitor from the aux out, and I'm then going to run the output of the right deck into the aux input, and then I'm going to set both decks to decay mode. Cut it down so I've got shorter tape lengths each side. So now there's going to be a combining factor of infinity sign feedback path. I'll need to have both recording, of course. So I'm going to set both time knobs all the way down so that they're going to completely decay. Yeah, so I seem to have found a spot where there's not a huge amount of feedback that's going to let it blow up. You can change that. There you go. So it's almost like not quite a shepherd tone, but the same sort of idea where we've got this continually descending type sound. And this is just a combination of one deck, a descending barber tone, the other one is an ascending. So they're constantly writing to each other and just creating this complex. This complex mess. So let's add one additional step. I'm going to run the output for my feedback path through the filter. Set that on high pass. This should help things from getting too muddy. with the limiter engaged on the 1047 as well, I've also got an additional tan H limiting stage, which is going to help just keep any feedback from running away from us. I'll also be able to drive the inputs and outputs a little bit harder and ride the volume at the filter. Here, I've also got the capacitive touch that I can play with, which is just going to add a little bit of warble to the playback, which will affect the repeating intervals as it retunes itself. So I thought I would do some examples showing the looper running as a looper in more of the typical guitar effect style context. So in this setup, I've got my guitar going through. I'm using a recovery effects preamp, which I'm then boosting up to modular level, and that's going through the Mordax just for some visualization, and then that's straight into the left deck of the looper. So quite happy with that gain staging with that sound. For controls, I'm using a simple modified, just Amazon bought keyboard sustain pedal that I cut the end off, and I've just got it set so it's acting as a manual gate. So I've got that running into the record gate input at the moment. So the looper, it can actually be configured to receive either triggers or gates for controlling record. So I can show that's me stepped on it once. As I step on it again, it stops recording. What I find is normally more useful is when it's acting as a gate, because that way, once I've defined the original length, so I've got like the main loop going that I'm overdubbing onto. If I have it so that it's gate controlled, so as long as I'm pressing the pedal, it's capturing into the loop. I find that gives a bit more direct control. So to set that, lean in here. So if you press both retrig buttons and then the raise button on the target deck, that's now changed it so that while the pedal's held, it's recording. When I release, it's playing back, and then it's only overdubbing as the pedal's held. So let's give that a go. we are. First playback loop. So I can then experiment and try, maybe a counter bass line. Something like that. You can just layer it up, keep adding more as much as you want. I did make a second pedal, but I can't find it for this video. Typical. So normally I would have a second pedal going into a raise. So at any point I could then quick clear, the same as pressing the raise button, and then capture more as I go. So that's kind of the most bare bones basic way of running it as a live looper. I'm going to start digging into some of the other like delay effects and how that can be applied to a live instrument, and add a lot of interesting character, a lot of cool effects that can be achieved from it. So that coming up. So first configuration trick I'm going to use, I'm going to put the left deck that I'm currently running into tape decay mode. And I'll have it so there are very few repeats, so that once the initial take is captured, if I'm holding record, it's going to degrade the each repeat of the loop. Now that I've released record, this is now just playing back, and it's only going to decay while record is held. Now I've muted my guitar and I'm just letting the record head run over it. So every single pass is going to be reducing the amplitude and quality of the loop each time. It's a really nice new way to work with a looper, where it is compounding and reducing the previous content each time. And anytime I want it to stay consistent, I just need to lift my foot and stop the recording, and it will repeat that without degrading. Cool. So I'm going to erase that, and let's add in some feedback. So what I can do initially is if I bring up the other channel. So I'll need to patch this because I'm going into the main input. To change that. There we are. So I'm now going into the aux input, and I'm hard left on the input aux, passing through the left deck into the right deck, and then that's feeding back. So I've got that sort of springy reverberant sound. Now with the playback, we're actually hearing that feeding back through, so it's basically doubling up the sort of reverberant sound. So what I'll do now, I'm going to put the right deck into normal delay mode. So just playing with the different delay times, there's already a lot. Bring it down a bit slower. Get some overdrive in there. A lot of it's a question of gain staging. I'm now holding down record, and because this side is in decay mode, but it's also recapturing this fed back signal. I can even let the sort of resonance just build up until the original guitar is just completely replaced. So next up, I've got a little bit more fun to show off in tape decay mode. So the previous example, I was still using it very much in a longer loop context where I would capture something, overdub over, and it was over time over a larger musical gesture. So this time, I'm going to hold record, get a good few seconds of loop length, but I'm now going to run it with a shorter playback length. So at the moment, I've got it in original speed forward, and I'm treating this more like a tape delay. So just a nice each time decaying delay. But where things start to get a lot more interesting is when I run it in pitch shifting mode. So here I've changed the playback speed to being 1 octave above. So every time I play a note, the delays are going to be uh, pitch shifted by an octave. I'll increase the length a little bit. Increase the delay or the time pot so that there's a longer duration for it to decay out. Really nice adding that sort of, a little bit more aggressive vibrato, where the speed of the vibrato is is doubled up. That's what was missing. So now I've sent the input to the aux input. And I'm sending that to the mostly to the left deck. So this is with my my pitch shifting delay. It's then running through the right deck, and I'm now getting that sort of barber tone, like a pitch shifting octave sound. So we'll go back to just no analog feedback and pitch shifting delay, and now I'm going to play with reverse pitch shifting, or just reverse in general. So let me find center point, and I put it to the first lit notch, so this is now in reverse but at half speed. When we play a note, we hear the direct dry note, but we then hear an echo of that note played in reverse an octave down. If I push the speed up to original playback speed, but in reverse. This would be nice, especially if you increase the length, so your tape delay time. Is a fairly unforgiving setting where if you do play a wrong note, it's quite, there's a long delay time, and then that dissonance can linger about. Let's go up an octave. add in some more feedback. Overdriving it a little bit. There we go. Let's add in a bit more chaos. I'm going to put the second one in tape delay mode and have it in reverse down an octave. Down quicker. Turned into a church organ at this stage. I think that's probably about as good a place to end it as any. Hopefully, this gives some ideas for how to use the looper moving forward, and looking forward to hearing and seeing what people do with it. So, thanks for watching.